Hello and welcome to episode 98 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, versatile 120-volt plug-in heat pump water heaters are hitting the market this year. Does this mean Brian will finally be able to shower in rush hour traffic?
Los Angeles is looking to ban urban oil and gas wells after decades of complaints about toxic putrid air that causes chronic health problems. A ban on Kardashians can't be far behind.
Big Light Bulb is screwing poor people in the United States by keeping profitable incandescent light bulbs on the market. Fortunately, they also have incandescent light bulbs in hell. One of the reasons it gets hot there.
Paybacks from UK wind turbines will cut consumer energy prices this year. UK wind turbines are also how Prime Minister Boris Johnson cuts his hair.
All that and more in this edition of The Clean Energy Show.
How are you?
I got a 140 square foot bedroom I'm sitting in, and it's hot as heck, even though it's minus 28 Celsius out, and I got the window open. Now I'm too cold. It's hard to find the right crack in a window when it's minus 28, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Brian, I've got my EV tax rebated to me because where we live, the only jurisdiction in this country that has an EV tax to pay for roads. And there was only 400 and some EVs when they came up with this policy about 3/4 of a year ago. But I got mine back and I took it in cash to stick it to the government. I could have donated it, but I took it in cash. I have it finally. It's donated into my account and I might buy a winter coat with it. I don't know. I'll do something good with it. I'll put it back into the podcast. But having James in a winter coat is kind of like having, putting money into the podcast. We don't want James to freeze. Minus 28.
No, yes. And I'm still waiting for mine. We set out we would donate ours. So we'll wait and see if they do that.
Well, we were talking about the electric scooter company, Ola, last week. And there's a news story on that, that they teased a picture of a car. I guess I was calling him the CEO, kind of an Elon Musk of India. Well, he answers tweets like Elon does. So it's kind of a thing now, I guess, if you're a powerful CEO trying to change the world. And he showed a picture to somebody of a little electric car. So I imagine, I don't know how much that would cost. I'm thinking 5,000, 6,000. But that's what I'd like to see in India too, because only about 40% of the registered vehicles are scooters. So it'd be nice to see some clean four-wheel transportation there as well. Also, Brian, the Volkswagen ID Buzz is starting to roll off the plant in Germany ahead of its world premiere. I'm excited. I thought that was one of those things that'll keep getting pushed back and maybe even never happen. Well, it's happening. I'm really happy about that. Yeah,
finally, it's been spotted driving around a few places, and they still have it in this camouflage paint with these weird stripy colors, but it actually kind of looks cool in the camouflage paint.
So you are using a press reader app.
Yeah, I've talked about this before, but I just wanted to mention it again because this is kind of like all that's going on in my world this week. Press Reader is an app that you can get for your tablet, and I believe it's available worldwide. I've been using it here in Canada, and it gives you access to all kinds of newspapers from all over the world, and you get them in the newspaper format, like as a PDF, which I've always enjoyed. I've always enjoyed newspapers. I love that, habit of reading a newspaper in the morning. But, newspapers have declined over the years. There's, they're just not what they once were because they're no longer the king in terms of news. But I'm finding it's really fun to go through world newspapers on the Press Reader app. And I can get it for free through my library card, and you might be able to do the same where you live. Your local library card might pay for the Press Reader thing. So I just have to log in every couple of days to keep it working for free. But there's also a paid version. You can just pay for Press Reader. And I've been reading newspapers from all over the world, English ones anyway, because that's the language I read. Mm-hmm. And there isn't as much clean energy news as I might have thought because
Really?
I guess, newspapers are it's more of a mainstream thing. So I think, maybe websites are still the better way to get the clean energy news. But super fun. And because newspapers are getting thinner over the years, there's less content. We just need to read 4 or 5 of them and you get the same content you used to get with just a single newspaper.
Yeah. Did you learn anything interesting this week? Name something you learned.
I can name nothing I learned.
Okay.
But you can get the the South China Morning News, published in Hong Kong, and I can read tomorrow's comic strips today because it comes out a day, because it's the next day.
You're godlike now.
I feel like godlike, yes.
That's one of the criticisms of the press is that they're not covering the climate crisis the way one might cover, say, a giant comet coming to end the world. It's a slow burn, but we need, the press to get on board. I know different organizations have dedicated themselves to CBC, and I think the Independent in the UK has done it.
Yeah, and I'll say too, I was reading the New Zealand Herald. I think that's what it's
Jesus,
called.
you're not retired yet. How are you getting time for this?
Like I say, they're very thin. You can get through them quickly, but New Zealand, of course, has done a very good job battling COVID. They've actually tried to, eliminate it and get rid of it, and actually tried to save people's lives. And yet, of course, like everyone else, they're having an Omicron wave. And the first 5 pages of the newspaper was all COVID stories, because that's how seriously they take it here. And we have way more cases per capita here, and it's maybe like one little story. Everyone's tired of it.
Well, if we kept it out for that long and kept it under wraps to a couple of people at a time and whatnot, and suddenly it came here, I think it'd be a comet-like story. So how we've been talking the last few weeks about how our little insignificant place up north here kind of gets into the news from time to time for different reasons, even though we're small. We had a nasty cold snap in Western Canada that's now in Eastern Canada and Northeastern United States. Watching people play football in the NFL at minus 16 the other day. Wow. I felt,
is that right?
I didn't think they did that down there, but more power to them. I don't know how the fans, of course, are drunk, but everybody else has to, bathe in Vaseline or something in order to keep the cold away. It's just nasty. I wouldn't want to do that here even. So TeslaTimeNews, which is, something we've talked about, they're a YouTube channel, popular one, talking about, they got critical of the issues that came out of our part of the world when that cold snap happened. Tesla heat pumps were having problems for some people, and it was, of course, very dire. They are notoriously pro-Tesla, Brian. Mm-hmm. They're Tesla fanboys. I'm kind of annoyed by them. In fact, they're such, but they've come out critical. Something you have not done, by the way. You have maintained your fanboy status. How's the stock doing? Does that depend on your mood?
Let me check.
Okay.
I mean, it's been down a lot lately, but it's up today, up 0.5%.
Well, I guess stocks tanked this morning. They're back up. Anyway, here's a clip from TeslaTimeNews talking about the heat pump issue that happened in cold weather and how Tesla might have done a better job addressing it.
I hate to sound critical, but I think this problem is happening because their engineering team doesn't live with cold weather. And what I mean by that is, I know that in theory, everyone can write like, oh, well, this part has been tested down to negative 10. But where we live in the Northeast, and if you live in Minnesota or Canada or some other cold place, you know that you have unique things that happen in your climate. Like it might be cold for days, or it might get warm and then cold and then warm and then cold. And so the things that freeze and melt and freeze and melt. I want to talk about over-engineering for a second here, because if they over-engineered this to work no matter what, then it would work. But instead, they've engineered it to California standards.
The Alaska team, who are like working on the problem, and I'm sure that they're out in the cold every day, freezing their butts off, coding and trying to figure stuff out. But if you're too focused on the wrong thing, and this is like Elon 101, like if you're asking the wrong questions, which is like, will the heat pump work at negative 30? It's great that it can do that. But if a little plastic flap doesn't close, and that prevents the whole system from working.
I mean, and then the second part is how they're dealing with this. Yes, things are going to go wrong, but when they do, communicate properly. Elon shouldn't be relying on someone to post something well and then go, great explanation. He should be giving the explanation.
Well, I haven't listened to them in a while, Brian, but apparently they've turned on Elon. Do you have any opinions on this?
Well, I've said this before. Driving my Tesla it sometimes feels like a California car. Like it's performed okay in the winter, but there's just something about it where you just get that feeling that it just is not winter tested quite enough, and it's very much designed with a California kind of mentality.
The Nissan Leaf that I drive seems to do a really good job in the winter. However, as we've said before, Nissan's temperature gauges only go down to minus 30.
To minus 30, yeah.
Which scares me, because are you not prepared for something worse than that? Because if your temperature gauge only goes that low, is your car going to seize up? And the answer is no, it does not.
All right, so there's a story from The Guardian this week about renewable energy payments in the UK. And the UK energy system is complicated, and I don't pretend to understand it. But of course, they've got lots of new, particularly wind turbine power coming online in the UK. And so they've forecast that paybacks from the industry could increase to a total of £770 million by the end of winter, shaving an average of £27 from the annual home energy bill. So the money that they've spent is starting to pay off. But there's another comment in the story that if they had done this sooner, that these paybacks would already be happening. So I don't know. It's just a good news story about power rates are going down in the UK, and it's because of renewables. And it's something we maybe don't talk about enough, but fossil fuel prices have been increasing slowly for the last 100 years, and they're going to keep increasing. But renewable energy stuff like wind and solar particularly is inexpensive, and it is likely to keep getting inexpensive. And things like nuclear power plants that already exist, hydropower that already exists, the pricing on that is pretty decent. Mm-hmm. But, the more we switch to clean energy, the cheaper it all gets, which, seems crazy, but it's true.
I remember that clean energy is still got the projections to 2030 have it falling significantly. It's fallen significantly already, obviously in 20 years, but it's going to keep going. What is good now is going to be even better as we go on in time. And Brian, this is a theme that's come up in the 2 years we've done our podcast, but I was never sure when it would happen. When would all this happen? It's kind of I was sort of led to believe that it would be later, much later, that we'd have to invest in all kinds of things, and then eventually they'd get paid off and electricity prices would come down. But to see this happening right now, that's amazing from a consumer standpoint. It's not just, the low prices are driving the investment to go to clean energy, but to think that the consumer is already starting to benefit is just amazing.
Yeah, and the UK, like I say, I don't fully understand their energy system there, but they have something of a free market energy system. So this is tied in part to how they run their whole system there. But, the net result is cheaper power for consumers.
And I'll remind you our story from last week. Scotland is installing or putting out tenders for twice the wind power that the UK already has. Scotland by itself. Twice, and they have a boatload, you could say.
You could.
I would. You wouldn't. It would be stupid to say that, but somebody might. They have a lot of wind, especially offshore wind. Compared to us, we have nothing here. And the United States is only starting to get it, and hopefully that goes well. It's, starting to happen there. Brian, from the New York Times, I have one of those stories that I have to get the blood pressure monitor out for. You, sir, are a light bulb fan.
Love them.
You're a cinematographer by nature over the years, the decades, and film director, and now film educator. And you like your lights. You like color. You like temperature, and you're paying attention to those things. You understand what 58 Kelvin means, 5800 Kelvin.
Yes. And the other thing is I hate waste. I've always hated waste. And this is always what has led me to, since I was a kid, wanting, a more efficient car, wanting an electric car, because there's so much waste involved. And that's the thing with incandescent light bulbs. They do produce beautiful light, like full spectrum light that is, objectively probably the best quality of light. But it's wasteful because most of that energy is lost in heat.
Which I've heard argue that it's not so bad in the wintertime because it goes towards heating your house, but it's not an efficient way of heating your house, which is why we don't use electric heaters that aren't heat pumps. Anyway, the story is this, Brian. Incandescent bulbs, which I thought as a Canadian were long gone.
Yeah, and these are your standard old-timey light bulbs.
This is when you see a little filament glowing inside, and months later the filament breaks and you buy a new bulb, and you spend a lot of electricity on it. 60 watts is 60 watts. 100 watts is actually 100 watts of usage, right? And we replace them with tiny fractions of that with, LED bulbs. First, we had those damn spiral fluorescent bulbs. God, I hated those. And I broke them, and lead goes everywhere.
They weren't the best.
And they didn't also, they were big and heavy and buzzed and terrible things. I could not wait for LED bulbs, and neither could you. And then suddenly, I mean, what was the most you spent on an average, say, a 60 watt LED bulb? What's the most money you've ever spent?
Well, I remember spending $20 each for a set of 3 bulbs, for my basement here. So $60 for 3 bulbs. That was a long time ago, but they're still in use. They're still working.
Now I think I spent $26 for 3 multicolored smart bulbs at Costco over Christmas. They weren't even on sale. So I can set not only the color temperature, but a color. Yeah. And I've been doing that. I found... You know what's weird is I found this nice sunsetty golden hour light color, and I dimmed the living room to that when I watch TV now, since I got those bulbs, and It makes me happy. There's something about that color that makes me happy, and it's somewhere between red and purple, and it's a happy sunsetty color.
And I like nice warm light. These are just normal LED bulbs here in a softbox. But then I've got my camera set to 4100 Kelvin because it gives a slightly warmer picture to help out my skin tones on my camera.
The kids would call it sepia toning.
Is that what it is?
Old man Stockton's trying to look like he's from the olden days. We could add artificial film grain to your video. So incandescent, inefficient light bulbs are living on in the United States dollar stores. And this is a problem. The Trump administration, I thought they would reverse this, but the Trump administration actually, and I was wondering about this, but they actually were lobbied by Big Light Bulb to do this. Because why? Incandescent light bulbs are higher profit margin. You don't have to put any money into development. There's less competition because only the big light bulb guys are making it. Whereas LEDs, everybody's making them. The people who made my bulb at Costco, I'm sure, are quite different than the Philips people who made the incandescent bulbs. Here's the thing, Brian. They want these in poor neighborhoods. So poor people are not getting a selection of LED bulbs to save them money. What does an LED bulb use in electricity? What's a 60 watt bulb use now?
Like around 9 watts.
About 9 watts. So it's a fraction. It's a fraction of what the 60 watts is. So that's how what that is compares to how much you're going to pay in electricity. So the poor people in poor neighborhoods are getting dollar stores and shopping at dollar stores and convenience stores, and they're paying $2.50 more per bulb than in wealthier communities, according to the New York Times. That is makes me mad.
No, and one of the famous planned obsolescence stories in industry, like industry often plans for things to be obsolete and break down. One of the most famous ones is from the light bulb industry. Many, many years ago, they got together as an industry association and they realized these bulbs were lasting too long. So there's a planned death span on normal incandescent light bulbs that was set by the industry 40 or 50 years ago.
Burn in hell, big light bulb. I'm thinking about changing my buying choices now. And I'm thinking of not supporting Philips. So the continued prevalence of incandescent bulbs in the United States is one result of a successful effort during the Trump presidency by industry group representing the world's biggest light bulb makers. The European Union said no, and that was fine, but not the United States, because the United States is the United States. I'm sorry, Florida, but you know who I'm talking about. The delay has enabled manufacturers to prolong profits from an inefficient technology, often at the expense of lower-income households, which end up having to replace these bulbs more often. It's not just the cost of electricity. You have to replace the damn things more often. Now, you and I can walk into our local dollar store here and get a really good bulb for, $3.50 or something? Canadian?
Yeah, the LED ones.
Yeah, a good LED bulb.
Yeah.
Nice color, nice longevity. I haven't had any problems with mine yet. And they're quite common.
But I will say I still have some complaints about those bulbs because, like, I've seen people standing around, like in Home Depot, shopping for light bulbs.
Yeah.
And, you know, you and I understand, you know, Kelvin and color temperature and stuff. But the average consumer going into Home Depot, I've seen many, many of them stare at that wall of light bulbs confused for, you know, hours trying to figure out which ones to buy. And then I think they often end up buying the daylight ones because it says
Why?
daylight on it.
That must be
Because
good. No.
they think, oh, daylight, that must be good. And then they take them home. But no, the daylight ones have a bluish kind of tinge to them. So never go with those. You want the warm ones, warm white, soft white.
It's because we as human beings are used to fire, right? We're used to that sort of warm temperature.
The warm light, yeah. So 2700 Kelvin is the nice warm light temperature you should look for.
They call it soft white, warm white, different things like that. White is kind of in the middle.
But try and avoid the daylight ones. And there's some people that recommend that, oh, you should use daylight ones in the bathroom or in the kitchen or something.
No.
And I say no, screw that. Don't ever buy the daylight ones.
My friend Lowell, he has daylight bulbs in his bathroom, and I just went, no, you want nice, warm, comforting place to
He's
poop.
a filmmaker. He should know better.
Yeah, he should know. It's just, and besides, you're getting cold, you're showering or bathing. Do you want to feel cold? You want to feel the warm glow of warm light. And, it's just, it's one of those things. And I don't like blue bulbs. I've tried them myself.
And of course, there have been, you know, crappy bulbs over the years as we do switch to this technology. So I do have some sympathy for people who say, oh, no, I prefer incandescent bulbs because they've gone and they've bought a crappy old fluorescent one, or they've bought a daylight one that's not, sometimes they're not full spectrum light, and it's very tricky to kind of tell the difference, but sometimes the light just looks off. It doesn't look right. But over the years, this stuff has really improved. If you go with a nice name brand bulb, 2700 Kelvin or warm white, these bulbs are fantastic.
Yeah, except you can't get them in poor neighborhoods in the States, which is wrong.
Yeah.
You know what really my pet peeve, I think I've mentioned this before if you're a longtime listener to the show, when I go to hotels, actually in the States, during my trip to the States, which was a couple of years ago, I was seeing hotel rooms with mixed colored bulbs because, they would have gone out and said, okay, we're going to save electricity. We're going to buy a spiral bulb and it's blue because it's all they had. Or a LED blue because those were the ones that were cheapest when that technology first came along. The warmer ones were harder to make. So you've got mixed colored bulbs in one lamp and sometimes varying between. That looks so amateurish. And I'm not staying in Motel 6s. I'm not, the Radisson is not where I'm at either, but I'm somewhere in between. And it's really, I can understand how they don't want to be wasteful, but gather up all the blue ones and put them somewhere else. Thank you.
No, I went on a tour a few years ago of the Manitoba Legislative Building, which is this fantastic kind of, marble palace in Winnipeg. Really amazing building. And there were wrong colored lights everywhere. They'd have them clustered together and 3 of them would be daylight and 4 of them would be warm. And I felt like complaining.
Okay, here's a weird one. I was at a church for Christmas Eve service before pandemic times. And the reason why we went there is because it was a family tradition that went back a long way. And they turn off the lights and have candles and sing Christmas carols from a choir. And it's when the Christmas spirit hits me every year, literally that time when the lights go out. Well, this time, they turned out the lights. They were all blue. It was the opposite of candlelight. It was just like all these ugly blue lights. And it was not Christmas Eve at all. It was like, oh, fake daylight. Good. But anyway, Brian, the world's biggest manufacturers like Signify, the Dutch multinational that makes Philips light bulbs, is using this lucrative strategy. So screw Philips. I say listeners, go boycott Philips. It's a little thing, but poor people do not deserve to be buying incandescent bulbs, paying more for electricity, which they can least afford, and thanks to one company that is grabbing for money. So screw you, Philips.
All right, from The Guardian. The University Park neighborhood of in Los Angeles has a lot in common with many areas. It's a dense population, lots of businesses, lots of housing, car dealerships, restaurants, so on and so forth. But they have something most cities don't have, which is oil fields. And you've probably noticed this in movies. This story sort of twigged memories of watching various movies shot in Los Angeles. And every once in a while, they'll cut to a shot or, there'll be oil rigs or oil wells, those pumpers moving up and down in the background. So yeah, Los Angeles is one of the few places that allows oil fields right in the city. And they're not everywhere, and they're not in the rich neighborhoods, that's for sure. But I suspect they were probably started, 100 years ago. And Los Angeles is one of those sprawling cities that's just gotten bigger and bigger. And, oil wells are obviously super lucrative, so nobody wanted to get rid of them. But the result is that, Los Angeles is a city that has active oil wells in the midst of it. But they're finally starting to do something about it. And activists are complaining, and people who live near the wells complain of various negative health effects. So, after a decade of complaints, Los Angeles City Council is expected to vote soon as next week on a measure that would ban new oil and gas wells in the city and phase out the existing wells over a 5-year period. So
5 years
passes.
That surprises me. That's going to take a lot of effort. You know how it's interesting though. I saw a YouTube video on this. They went to great lengths to disguise these wells. Like there's architecture involved. They hired architects to design interesting structures, and sometimes they even look like houses in the middle of a neighborhood.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
It's quite remarkable. I can't remember which YouTube channel has that, but I remember seeing oil wells when I was there, and you're driving around the roads and you think, why? This is so weird. No, not here. What Quentin Tarantino movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the stunt guy lives right by an oil well. Did you remember that? He lives right by an oil well by a drive-in, a pump jack.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And he drives his car in, and there's a drive-in, and there's an oil well.
And I bet most people are surprised by that, but it's real. It's a real thing. And of course, they had an oil leak off the coast there recently as well. So, yeah, we have listeners in California. What do you think about all this? Let us know in the email or whatever. But Brian, I wanted to talk to you, sir, about a heat pump that I saw online, and I thought it's interesting because it's a 120-volt heat pump water heater. That is instead of an electric water heater that uses a filament, it uses a heat pump on top of the water heater to heat the water, and it only uses 120 volts. You can plug it into a standard outlet in North America here. So, before that, they had 240-volt ones. The heat pump, by the way, basically is a really tall tank water heater. So the heat pump sits on top, and I've seen the units there. There's outlets near these water heaters frequently, so you can replace them pretty easily. My water heater is rented, but the rental company is just waiting for it to explode because it's like 12. It's older than the house since we bought the house. So it's more than 13 years old. They don't last that long. I don't want to flood the house. I don't want to flood the house with my tank water heater.
But is it an electric one?
No, it's gas. But you turn off the gas supply, seal up the pipe for that. That's one job you'd have to do. So this would allow people with gas heaters, water heaters, to easily switch them out. And they've come up with a way of doing this. I thought it was interesting. See, normally, the problem with heat pump water heaters is they don't regenerate quickly. It takes a long time to regenerate. So if you go have a long shower like my daughter does, you're going to have to wait a long time to get in there. But the way they've mitigated that is they've turned whatever, like a standard X number of gallons water heater into a bigger one, but just simply by heating the water hotter. However, that can scald you and your children, right? So what they do is they put a mix valve right on the water heater and mix the cold water into the temperature you want right there. So that solves the problem of having, not having a quick regeneration of the water heater unit. So that's interesting. And apparently they save a lot of money. 50% of gas water heaters have an electrical line running to them already, apparently. Mine doesn't, to allow for electrical switching. For every 10 degrees you turn up your water heater above the standard 120 Fahrenheit, as if you get an extra 10 gallons of storage. So that's what they're doing with these. They're making them pretty hot, depending on how many people. They say they will work for 2 to 4 people. That's our family, 2 to 4 people. 3 people usually nowadays. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting because it's so easy to do. It's not a big problem, right?
Yeah, it is now. Now that they have 120 volt ones, it is, more of a big deal if it needs 240. And, I've already said our electrical panel is full. I am hoping to get a bigger panel, but we're all going to need to electrify everything. So everyone who's got a gas water heater, this is a way simpler solution to go electric.
So the 240 volt models that exist, they have rods in them, a resistive heater backup. That takes care of, if your daughter uses all the hot water, it'll kick in with the resistive and quickly heat the water. Well, these don't have them. So what they do instead is they heat the water hotter so that you have more available to you, and you can pick that out.
That's fascinating. So Yamaha is launching some new electric scooters, and they're real cool looking. And I wanted to mention it mostly because it ties into what we talked about last week, which is the Gogoro company, which is making these swappable batteries that are really big in Taiwan and other places in Asia. But Yamaha has decided to go with that standard for their batteries. So
interesting. I didn't read that until now. I didn't see that in the script. That's really cool.
So I just love that.
If everybody does that, wow.
And if we can all sort of standardize on that one swappable battery the world over, I don't know, that might be asking a bit too much, maybe at least in certain parts of the world. But I just love the idea of swappable batteries for these little scooters. It's where swappable batteries really make sense. And having Yamaha on board with the Gogoro batteries, I think is fantastic.
That's encouraging to think that people could get along like that, because we don't even have standard car charger ports throughout the world. It's starting to get that way, but there was a lot of disagreement on that. That's encouraging. As long as Gogoro lets other people maybe make their batteries, otherwise you're stuck with Gogoro and whatever parameters they set out for price and whatnot. But anyway, very interesting stuff. Brian, let's get to the Clean Energy Show mailbag. This is the point of the show where I remind people that the lightning round is coming up. We'll end the show by breezing through the rest of the headlines very quick. Let's dip into the mailbag. Hi, guys. I'm modestly enthusiastic for the show. Last week, I said you don't have to love the show when your emails. Because, when I write podcasts, I always start with I love the show. I feel obliged to say that.
Totally.
Love is a strong word. I like the show, but I don't love the show, everything. I mean, you have some podcasts that you love. I know that.
Yeah.
You travel to watch them in person. So it says, hi, guys. I'm modestly enthusiastic for the show. I'm from the Northeast USA, and I've had my base model Volkswagen ID.4 for about 7 months. I got about 12,000 miles on it. That's about 20,000 kilometers, and I'm also modestly enthusiastic for it. You were recently mentioning how fast EVs heat up in the winter, and it's something I hadn't thought about too much until the recent cold snaps of -12. Oh, poor you. -12. How are you alive? Yes, I know it's way colder for you guys. It's amazing how fast it heats up. It's compared to my previous internal combustion vehicle, my gas car. So that got me to thinking about all the other things I couldn't see myself giving up by going back to a gas car. No tailpipe emissions, paying about 75% less on fuel, never leaving the house on empty, way less back and forth between the accelerator and brake, my knee and hip thank me. Hello, fellow old person. Instant torque. You cannot deny the instant torque of electric vehicles. Lots of fun. Even if you're not seeking fun, you can't help yourself. I like to see little old ladies drive instant torque electric cars and just, burn some rubber on the road. Or little old men. Nearly instant heat in the winter, which is nice because you don't have to wait for friction to heat up. It's just electrical, so it heats up instantly. quietness, and lack of constant vibration. So no taking the car in for oil changes 4 times a year. I don't know who does that anymore 4 times a year. That's like listening to your oil change people tell you to do that. I'm a once a year guy now. Even Toyota lets me do that with synthetic oil.
Yeah, I think I was doing twice a year.
You're such an old timer. The environmental benefits are obviously wonderful, but I think if these companies focus their advertising on the things that appeal to our lazier natures, we'd see faster adoption. Yeah, I agree. What would you guys say are the top benefits of EV ownership? And I would say you cover them. It says, Sincerely Jay from the Northeast U.S. I agree. I love the torque. I love the heating up fast, which, believe it or not, does it even in the cold. I love the fact that you don't have to start the car to heat it. I love the technology in them, the app control that with some cars, most cars that you can do. And I generally love the ride quality where it's luxurious, even if it's not a luxury car. Like my car's just a regular car. It's probably the electric version of the Nissan Versa, and it just feels luxurious to have quiet, smooth acceleration, What would you say?
Yeah, I think he's right that they're maybe not focusing on the right things when they advertise these cars. It's, it's like having a gas pump in your driveway.
Yep.
Like that's an amazing thing that nobody ever really thinks about. Everyone thinks it's some kind of hassle to charge your car. But no, it's the opposite. It's like having a gas station at your house.
It's actually the opposite. I was going to mention that. I really like that. Because when I go to a gas station to fill up another car, it's like, what is this? This is primitive. Why do people do this? I got gasoline on my runners.
One time I drove to Seattle from here, and I was somewhere in the mountains gassing up, and I was just finishing up gassing up the car, and the hose on the gas pump came detached from the gas pump and fell on the ground.
But it wasn't running.
No, it wasn't running yet. I hadn't driven away.
Thank God.
I just I looked in shock, and it's like, holy crap. And the guy from the gas station came out to look at it, and he looked at me like I had done something wrong. No, it just fell off.
I'm Canadian. Come on. I'm not what do you think I do? That's amazing. I do like that because, we talk about how you lose range in the wintertime when it's extremely cold, but it doesn't matter because you're leaving with a full tank of whatever you got every morning. In most cars, it really does not matter. So I do love that a lot. And they make it easy, like Tesla, you just grab the cord and it'll automatically open up the little slot for you. And I just push a button and everything pops open and there's a light in there so you can see where to put it. So it takes just seconds. And, I love it. I love being able to do that. And I didn't think about that before I bought the car, that would be a big plus, but it is. So thank you, Jay from the United States. So Eric, who's written us before, is also commenting again this week. I believe he's from California. First, let me say that I really enjoyed the new intro format with your hilarious jokes at the end of the story summaries. I think you guys are worthy of your own late night comedy show. Probably not.
Fantastic.
It's probably a stretch. Maybe on Fox News. Maybe we could replace Mike Huckabee. Also, I suspect that people who take the time to email you really do love your podcast. I can't imagine someone taking the time to write you if they think you're just okay. So I really do love your podcast. Thank you so much for that. I want to take issue with an opinion James expressed a while back regarding subsidies for rooftop solar viz utilities solar. And that's when I was listening to an interesting podcast with some people debating utility solar and climate change. And this was an advocate for solar. He was actually talking to solar installers at the time, and it was quite a remarkable thing that he said. He said that we need to stop the climate. It's an emergency. All of our government money should go to the most efficient way possible, and that is in the grid. So I started to rethink things because I was, of course, I have solar on my rooftop. You do too. And I love it's just educational. I think it's great for the kids and everything. You really get sold on the fact that the damn thing works, right? Because it's there every day and you can look at it in your app on winter, cloudy, rainy, whatever, you can see what it's doing. And you know that translates to us using solar for the whole grid. But yeah, he says he recently finished reading a book called Freeing Energy by Bill Nussey. He makes a very compelling argument in favor of rooftop solar over utility scale solar in the section entitled Cost Comparisons to Large Scale Solar Missed the Point. So I can't go into everything he wrote, but there's the book for you if you're interested. As he says, no matter how you pencil it out, we want to reduce our carbon footprint. And, it's kind of like it's cheaper for the government, but it's not cheaper for consumers because consumers don't see the savings on the solar, but unless you put them on your own roof. It trickles down eventually, like we were talking about with wind in the UK, but it takes time and you see it, basically right away. Depending on where you are, it's a good investment. We don't have the subsidies we used to have, though. No,
and they're still debating, of course, in California that they're trying to ruin the solar rules down there and make it way more expensive for people to do rooftop solar. And I'm sure the utility has an argument saying, hey, well, we're not making enough money. And that, that's probably true. But
that's what they were going to
Eric says,
here.
It's an emergency. Like, we have to stop dicking around and just encourage every possible thing that can switch us to clean energy faster.
Yes, that's what the utility argued here, that we'd have to charge everyone who doesn't have solar more money. And there was very few people, like electric cars, that had solar panels at the time. So they got rid of the subsidy. Unfortunately, we grabbed that before it went away. I think one thing the government can do for your solar is what they're doing in Australia, and that is taking away the red tape, making it cheaper in that way in order to facilitate faster. When it's faster, it's cheaper when you go from decision to contacting the company, and they don't have to buy, your plans for your house from City Hall like mine company did. They just go and they put it on. Basically, they take away the red tape, and that makes it cheaper. That they can certainly do. Solar in Australia is crazy, and it's not hurting anything either. The grid is surviving just fine, thank you. And it is good to have distributed solar. I don't think you should put too much money in subsidizing it. I'm skeptical of that.
Yeah, just make it easy for people to do it because people want to do it. And then you have the public paying for your grid upgrades. Yeah. Like, why not?
Why not? It's a great idea. So I'll give you the title of the book again. It is, wait for it, Freeing Energy by Bill Nussey, Nussey. He's a former Silicon Valley entrepreneur turned climate guy. I've got a new EV myth segment running on TikTok, Brian. We're up to 2,300 followers this morning.
Fantastic.
It's crazy.
We're so hip with the kids.
I don't know who we're hip with, but we're hip with somebody. We're finding our people over there. And hopefully if you are new to the podcast and come over from TikTok, welcome. But I was wondering to our listeners and new TikTok listeners, what EV myth have you come across? Do you keep coming across? Let us know, and we'll address it on the show and on TikTok. Feedback drives our show, Brian. Contact us at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com.
Yeah, and those little sort of, news tidbits seem to work well on TikTok. It's a great way to spread information.
On Twitter or TikTok, our handle is Clean Energy Pod. If you want to go over to the TikTok, I have. And Brian, I swear to God, I get served without cause. Countless scantily clad women holding towels in front of them, in bikinis. That's all I get served
on TikTok.
And I try not to look. You can't. If you look at it for 2 seconds, then it's like, oh, he likes this. So you got to be really quick to say, no, I don't. Or my son actually just finally told me that if you hold your finger on the TikTok, you can select something that says, I'm not interested in this. But I still haven't. I've searched some electric car stuff and I found some interesting things. The thing about TikTok is it's go bang, 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 bang. Here's the Kia EV6 and blah, blah, blah. And, and it's because nobody
it's too fast for me.
The podcast is the opposite of TikTok. So if you're here from TikTok, welcome to our relaxing conversation.
I like reading newspapers. That's the opposite of TikTok.
Maybe they'll have somebody reading the newspaper on TikTok. Maybe I should do that as my side hustle.
Well, there used to be on City TV in Toronto when I lived there. There was a guy who literally did that. Bob Hunter, was that his name?
I don't know.
And he was an environmental guy. He was a Greenpeace guy. But they had a segment on the City TV in the morning where he would literally read the newspaper. And it was just a few minutes long, and he would just open it up and pick out a couple of stories they liked and talked about it. It was one of my favorite things.
Well, we also have a YouTube channel. All these links are on, if you click on our webpage in the your podcast app. You can also leave us a voicemail online at speakpipe.com/clean energy show. You just click a button and leave us your voice. It's time for What Do You Think?
What do you think?
Brian, it's been a while, but I want to know what you think about some things. This is the segment where I ask you, because I see headlines and I read the story and I think, I want to ask Brian about this. So this is that segment, okay? Are you ready? You sitting comfortably? The Tesla Cybertruck prototype is shown in detail with a new leaked video. I don't know what to think. What do you think?
I think it looks great. I'm starting to get excited about the Cybertruck. Tomorrow there's going to be the earnings call, the quarterly earnings call with Tesla, and they're supposed to have an updated roadmap. So yeah, everyone's hoping for new information about when the Cybertruck might be coming out. Hopefully a few of them by the end of the year or something like that. But yeah, in preparation, they seem to have a few prototypes now that have been spotted and are wandering around. So yeah, I'm getting excited. I think the Cybertruck is going to be an amazing vehicle.
Last week was my partner's birthday, the day we recorded the podcast, so it wasn't released right away. And we got a bunch of messages of people panicking. It's like they're addicted. So they're addicted to James and Brian. And it's like, where's my show? What's wrong? You guys okay? Yeah, we're here. And usually the show will be released early Wednesday mornings when you wake up. So Renault, Mitsubishi, which I have a hard time saying. In my head, it goes really well. In my mouth, it does not contort that well. Mitsubishi. Renault and the various Japanese companies that aren't Honda and Toyota, including Nissan, are forming an alliance to make a more affordable EVs. What do you think?
I think it's a good idea. I think everybody's struggling to make EVs, so teaming up is probably a good idea.
Tesla insurance is expanding to Arizona and Ohio and is now available in 5 states. I don't know what you have to say about that, but is it going to keep going?
Nothing new, but yeah, they're expanding Tesla insurance far and wide as quickly as they can. And it appeared in another country as well. I forget which one.
A bunch of former SpaceX engineers are making electric and autonomous railway vehicles. That is, train cars that will do their own things. Is this the end of this civilization, Brian?
Yeah, you're thinking this is a component of the Mad Max wasteland?
I don't know, but
trains traveling by themselves?
Do we really need trains that drive themselves? There's tracks. I mean, they can only do so much to us, but okay, we'll leave that go. Tesla Supercharges in North America, this is hot off the press, are rumored to be getting this is according to an investor, rumored to be getting a charging speed bump to 324 kilowatts from the current max of 250. And now they're supposed to be capable of 350 when they came out, the version 3s. But 250 was kind of where they're at. Apparently, is this a Cybertruck thing or what? Or is it the new vehicle?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if I'd be surprised. I don't think my car can charge any faster, but maybe the new Model S and the new Model X, which have an updated architecture, and then the Cybertruck presumably will have the updated architecture. So this is only for the version 3 Superchargers. These are the newer chargers that have been deployed in the last couple of years. And there was always on the sort of spec sheet the idea that they could probably charge faster. So still not fully confirmed, but this seems very plausible. 324 kilowatts for faster charging for things like the Cybertruck.
And version 4 of the Supercharger is rumored to be coming sometime in the future. So we'll see about that.
Yeah, there's always updates.
It's time for the Clean Energy Show Lightning Round. Oh, we've gone long this week. I blame myself. Lamborghini announces all future vehicles will have an electric motor. First all-electric, likely a 4-door car, which I didn't think Lamborghini would make such a thing, Brian.
No, they make, it's called the Urus. They have a sort of an expensive SUV that's is not as expensive as their other cars. But it's all going to happen pretty slowly. Their sort of supercars are going to switch to hybrid first. And then the first fully electric, which looks like more of a normal car, not until later in this decade. So, it's another important announcement of electrification, but this is a niche product, and it's not going to happen overnight.
Tesla now operates the most productive car factory in the United States. What does this say about their approach?
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. This is the Fremont factory in California, which is a kind of a cobbled together factory. It's not custom built like their other ones, like the one in China and the new ones in Texas and Berlin. So they bought an old car factory and, converted it to their own uses. But over the years, they've made it more and more efficient. And now it is, the biggest producing car factory in the U.S. Now, most other car makers have more factories than Tesla. Tesla's going with a strategy of fewer factories that make more cars. So it's not necessarily totally analogous. But that's still kind of a big deal that now Tesla has the largest producing car factory in the U.S. And the Texas one is going to be 2 or 3 times bigger than that.
GM is threatening action against any dealerships attempting markups on upcoming EVs and will direct EVs away from offending dealerships. I like this. We had a story last week of a Hyundai dealer upping the price over the course of between somebody leaving their home and getting there 3 hours away by $10,000. So that does not make me like car dealerships at all. I know they're struggling, but come on, people.
Yeah, and supply is going to be limited for these EVs, but I hope they can all resist the temptation to mark up the price, because that's not going to help anybody.
Canadian Pacific Railroad and Ballard Power Systems, a maker of hydrogen fuel cells, announced plans to significantly expand CP's hydrogen locomotive program, adding 8 additional 200 kilowatt fuel cell modules to that. This is, we criticize fuels like hydrogen, but maybe this would work because trains have specific routes and go to specific places and go a long way and need lots of power. It could be one of those things.
Yeah, hydrogen probably not useful for passenger cars, but large shipping like this,
and they could ship,
it might work.
They could ship their own hydrogen.
Yeah.
Instead of a coal car, I don't know. That goes back to Electric says that GM is actually making EVs because the pre-production Cadillac Lyriq, which I think is a good car, checks all the boxes, is rolling off the assembly line right now, and deliveries will follow. Good news. Good news, Brian. It's going to be a big car.
Good news. Although they're probably not making enough of them.
GM and LG announce a giant new 50 gigawatt hour battery cell factory in the U.S. These announcements come almost daily, but this is a big one.
Yeah, LG, GM, 50 gigawatt hours. That's huge. But, I expect another announcement like this by the time we record our next show.
Kia America announced yesterday that pricing for its 2022 EV6 lineup will start at $40,900 US. That's before the $7,500 off from the federal rebate. That's for the 2-wheel drive light model. That is, let's see here, 232 miles of range. That's 373 kilometers. A little bit light there for me. It goes up to 274 miles or 440 kilometers. That's better. A lot of, especially in cold climates, I'm recommending the higher end batteries these days, it feels like, which is too bad because it costs more, but that's where we're at. Are you excited about the EV6 at all?
Yeah, pricing for the EV6 and the Hyundai Ioniq 5 looks absolutely decent in Canada and the US. Again, they're not necessarily going to make enough of them, but I think, that's a great car.
Rivian is partnering with Under Canvas. That is an organization to bring EV charging to the most beautiful campsites in the United States. Love that. Love the fact that EV charging is coming to nature, because that's the people who appreciate it.
No, and last summer we drove to Cypress Hills Provincial Park and just spent a night there in the woods, and we drove out in the morning in our electric car. past all kinds of wildlife. There was deer beside the road and, raccoons and rabbits everywhere. And here we were just purring past them in our electric car, not making any noise, not spewing any smoke at them. And it felt really good.
I've been there with the Prius when it goes into EV mode when you slow down. So if you're stopping for a bear to cross the road, there's no engine running. It doesn't hear anything or see anything. It's just silence. And that's where you would, hear me screaming in complete silence too if it came after me. But that's another story. A new study from the Journal of Climate Change and Health says that British Columbians, it's a province in Canada, had significantly higher climate change anxiety following the 2021 Western North American heat dome, which killed hundreds of people and was unheard of. I'm not surprised by that. I mean, if you don't have climate anxiety after that, I have anxiety from ever wanting to move to BC after that happened, Brian.
No, and it was followed by massive flooding. So if they did this survey again after the massive flooding, I think the results would be even greater.
It's just sad because it's so beautiful. It's the most beautiful part of the country. And we were talking mountains and forests and streams and all that. And it's just undergoing tremendous stress from climate change that is only going to get much worse no matter what. We're just at the beginning of this. People who buy, this is new e-bike research to end the show this week. People who buy an e-bike more than double their use of bicycles for transportation. This group of e-bikers that were sampled said that their e-bike use went from 2.1 kilometers on average to 9.2 kilometers on average. So this is kind of what I've been telling people when they ask me about my e-bike, is that I do a lot more because you can. And because even on windy days, you go out because there's nothing to stop you. Wind is nothing if you
go farther and faster.
Yeah. So cycling as a share of all bike kilometers went from 17 to 49% after buying an e-bike. So not where we live, but there are better parts of the world, Brian. That's our time for this week. Consider rating and reviewing our show on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out wherever we are, and we'll see you again next week.
See you next week.